The Zorvani Empire had ruled many star systems for hundreds of years. They were strong, rich, and feared. Their ships were large and fast. Their soldiers were trained to follow orders without question. People in the galaxy whispered stories about them, but no one dared to speak out loud. The Zorvani believed they could do anything they wanted. One day, 10 humans were flying through space near the edge of the Zorvani border. They were not part of any army. They were not spies. Some were explorers, some were traders. A few were simply travelers moving from one planet to another. But the Zorvani did not care. They said the humans crossed into restricted space. They said the humans were a threat. There was no warning, no questions, no chance to explain. The Zorvani sent a small group of warships to grab the humans' ship. It wasn't a battle. The humans didn't even know what was happening. In just a few minutes, their ship was pulled in by force. The humans were dragged out and thrown into cold, dark cells. They asked why they were taken. No one answered. They asked to speak to someone. No one came. They were alone. Then, without a trial or even names being spoken, the Zorvani made their decision. The humans would be punished, not for what they did, but for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The Zorvani wanted to send a message. They wanted to show everyone in the galaxy that they were still powerful. So, they chose to do something cruel. On a frozen asteroid far from any sun, they built a stage of metal poles and dark stone. This place had no warmth, no air, and no hope. The Zorvani tied each human to a tall steel pole spaced evenly in a circle. They did not scream. They did not beg. Most of them stayed quiet. Some prayed. Some cried. A few closed their eyes and waited. High above them, a drone hovered, recording everything. The Zorvani streamed the video to dozens of planets. The message was simple. This is what happens to those who enter our space. No trial, no last words, no mercy. As the asteroid turned slowly in space, the cold ate away at the humans. One by one, their eyes closed. Their skin turned pale. Their voices faded into silence. The stars above watched but did not speak. The Zorvani laughed. To them it was a game. They believed Earth was far away and weak. They thought no one would respond. They thought the galaxy would move on and forget. But they were wrong. What the Zorvani didn't know was that the galaxy had changed. The humans were no longer the small, quiet species they once were. They had built colonies, formed partnerships, and made friends. Many races in the galaxy had come to trust humans. Some had fought beside them. Others had been saved by them. The Zorvani had not just killed 10 people. They had awakened something much larger. And Earth had been listening. Back on Earth, the message spread quickly. At first, people thought it was fake. The video was too cold, too cruel. But then names were found. Faces were recognized. One of the humans was a teacher from Luna Base. Another had just visited their family on Mars. One was a young woman known for helping refugees on Titan. These were not soldiers. These were everyday people. Families broke down. Friends wept. Strangers grew angry. And in every corner of human space, a quiet question began to rise. Why did the Zorvani think we would let this happen? On the news, reporters tried to stay calm, but you could see it in their eyes. They were shocked, hurt, furious. People started sharing the video even though it was painful. Artists painted pictures of the 10 humans standing in the cold. Musicians wrote songs of sadness and strength. Children asked, why didn't anyone help them? Parents struggled to answer. Some people called for peace. They said revenge was not the answer. Others called for war. They said the Zorvani had to pay. But in the middle of all the voices, something else was growing. It was not loud. It was not fast. But it was steady. It was unity. For the first time in a long while, Earth was no longer just one planet. It was one heart. The pain of those 10 humans became the pain of everyone. And in that pain, a decision was made, not by one person or one leader, but by many. A quiet plan began to form like a storm in the distance. It was not spoken out loud, but everyone could feel it. The Zorvani had made a mistake. They had shown the galaxy what they truly were, not strong, not wise, just cruel, and now others began to take notice. Small races that once feared the Zorvani began to speak. They said, maybe Earth will stand up to them. Some reached out in secret, others just watched, but deep down hope began to grow. Meanwhile, the Zorvani sat on their golden thrones, proud and smug. They didn't see the storm coming. They were too busy celebrating. In their minds, they had won. They had shown everyone their strength, but they didn't understand what kind of people they had hurt. Humans do not forget. They remember names, they remember faces, and they do not stay quiet forever. On a small moon near the edge of human space, a mechanic wiped tears from her eyes and went back to work, fixing a ship faster than she ever had. On a station near Saturn, a retired general stood up from his chair and opened a dusty drawer filled with old plans. On a farming world far from the center, a young man packed a bag, kissed his mother, and said, "I'll be back soon." In those quiet places, something powerful was moving. Not anger, not hate. Purpose. The Zorvani had taken 10 lives, but in doing so, they had lit a fire in the hearts of billions, and that fire would not go out. The galaxy was watching, and Earth was listening. Soon Earth would answer, and the answer would change everything. The 10 humans who were taken by the Zorvani were not famous. They were not leaders. They were not soldiers. They were just people. But each one of them had someone who loved them. Each one had a life, a dream, a story. And when they were killed, it did not end with them. Their stories reached across planets and moons. Their names were remembered by those who would not let them be forgotten. One of them was named Ellie Tran. She was only 22 years old. Ellie grew up on Luna, Earth's moon. She was a student studying to be a doctor. Her mother was a nurse. Her father fixed solar panels on the outer domes. Ellie had always wanted to help people. She had worked in hospitals and shelters, taking care of sick children and lonely elders. When she wasn't helping others, she painted pictures of stars. She said the stars made her feel peaceful. Ellie had taken the space trip as a reward. She had finished a big project for school and was traveling with her friends to see a new research outpost. She never returned. Her mother, Lynn, was quiet for 3 days after hearing the news. She did not speak to anyone. She just sat on Ellie's bed holding her daughter's old shoes. But Lynn had a sister, Dr. Mai Tran. Dr. Mai was a scientist who worked on secret energy programs for the Earth space defense. She had helped design the shields that protected cities from solar storms. She had influence. She had tools. And now she had a reason. Another human was Javier Mendez. He was a chef who lived on a floating city above Venus. People came from all over the solar system to eat his meals. Javier had grown up poor, but he worked hard and never gave up. His food was simple but full of love. On holidays, he cooked for free for the workers who kept the floating city running. He said no one should eat alone on special days. Javier had a brother named Marcos. Marcos wasn't a chef. He was a retired Marine who had seen battle on the red sands of Mars. He now trained peacekeepers on Titan. When he saw the video of his brother on the asteroid, he didn't shout. He didn't cry. He simply stood up, walked to his locker, and opened a case he hadn't touched in years. It was time. Then there was Annika Bose. Annika was a teacher on Europa. Her classroom was small but full of bright colors. She taught young children about science, language, and kindness. Annika had once rescued a lost ice miner's child in the snowstorm tunnels. The whole colony had cheered for her. Her students loved her. She loved them back. But what the Zorvani didn't know was that Annika's best friend was Counselor Arjun Kal, a man who sat on Earth's Galactic Council. Arjun and Annika had grown up together in the crowded halls of New Mumbai. He used to carry her books. She used to help him study. They had made a promise as kids. We will always protect each other. He had failed once. He would not fail again. One of the men on that asteroid was named Tom Booker. He was a janitor on a deep space station. Tom was not rich. He was not strong, but he was kind. He would fix broken heaters, patch up torn suits, and share food with anyone who was hungry. His job was cleaning, but he did so much more. Tom once saved a small creature from getting crushed in a cargo bay. That creature was not from Earth. It was a small alien named Firo from a planet called Nyx. Firo's people had long memories, and when they saw Tom's face on the broadcast, they remembered. Firo's family sent a message to their king. A friend has fallen. We must honor him. Another victim was Mei Lin Zhao. She was an artist. She painted huge pictures on asteroid walls and station tunnels. She made people feel joy in empty places. She made dark places shine with color. People loved her work even if they never met her. But one person who loved her deeply was her wife, Captain Imani Wade. Captain Wade commanded a rescue ship for disaster zones. She had pulled people from burning hulls, from broken domes, from ice-covered storms. She had never failed a rescue. Until now. When she saw Mei Lin's last moments, she stood on the deck of her ship, her fists tight. Her crew said nothing. They knew what she would do, and they were ready to follow. There was also Omar Bikel. He was a space farmer who grew rare plants on Ganymede. Omar's gardens fed thousands. He was always smiling, always singing. He said the stars helped plants grow better if you talked to them. Omar had 2 daughters. They were young but brave. They watched their father's death with tear-streaked cheeks. Omar's cousin, Desta, worked with Earth's food distribution networks. She controlled hundreds of trade routes. She knew where every ship went, where every supply line passed. And when she heard about Omar, she didn't just mourn. She changed routes. She began to reroute food, slow down trade, and make the Zorvani feel the pinch. No guns, just numbers, and the numbers began to speak. Another victim was Milo Hart. He was an engineer still training on Callisto. He fixed communication towers and loved reading old Earth books. Milo's father, Derek Hart, was a writer who had once exposed corruption in a major company. He had enemies, but he had truth. Derek had gone quiet after his son left for space. But now the fire in his heart burned bright again. He picked up his pen and wrote the story of the 10. It went viral. It crossed every network. People began to learn, to care, to remember. Then there was Zara al-Shamari. She was young, just 16. She was traveling with her aunt and uncle to visit family on a far moon. Zara loved music. She played the flute. She wanted to become a composer. Her parents were teachers on Earth. When they saw the video, they broke down. But Zara's aunt Fatima was no ordinary woman. She worked for Earth intelligence. She knew codes, maps, secrets, and now she had a mission. Another man was Gabriel Thorne. He had been traveling alone. No family, no known ties, but someone still cared. An AI he had helped teach. A learning machine he had treated with kindness. That AI, named Ivy, ran part of Earth's navigation systems. Ivy began searching, finding, tracking. She remembered Gabriel. She would not forget. The last of the 10 was Liana Brooks. She had worked in silence, fixing small errors in long-range probes. Her life was quiet, but she had a friend, Hannah, a hacker who once owed Liana her freedom. Hannah had skills most didn't understand, and now she used them. Zorvani's system started to twitch. Files moved. Lights blinked. It began with one person, but it would grow. The Zorvani had made one big mistake. They thought they killed 10 strangers, but they hadn't. They had touched lives filled with love. They had pulled at threads connected to great webs, and those webs were now shaking. Each person had a name. Each one had a place in the galaxy. A friend, a brother, a mentor, a hero. They were not just 10 lost people. They were family. And humans never forget their family. Across Earth, Mars, and beyond, people began to speak their names. Children lit candles. Pilots painted their faces on ship walls. Colonies built statues. Songs were written. Stories were told. They were more than victims now. They were the reason for change. The Zorvani thought no one would care. But each of those 10 had someone who did. And those people were not alone. Together, they would wake up the stars and shake the galaxy. The galaxy was very big. Stars burned in every direction. Ships flew between planets every day. But in the middle of that great silence, something small began to move. It wasn't loud. It wasn't fast, but it was real, and it was human. After the 10 humans were killed, Earth did not answer with a war, not at first. There were no big ships flying toward the Zorvani, no rockets, no armies. Instead, the humans began to work quietly, not to fight, not to shout, but to remind the galaxy that they were still here and they were watching. It started with a single ship. A Zorvani cargo ship, large and full of supplies, was flying through Sector 9. This ship had guards and strong walls. It had passed through space many times without trouble. But this time something strange happened. One moment it was flying. The next it was gone. No distress call, no signal, no trace. The ship simply disappeared. At first, the Zorvani said it must have been a storm, or maybe pirates. but deep down they were not so sure. Then a few days later, a power station near the Zorvani border stopped working. It didn't explode. It didn't burn. It just shut off. All the lights went out. The workers there found that their tools no longer worked. The screens showed strange code. A message was written in the dark, glowing blue across one wall. It said, "We do not forget." The workers were confused. They tried to erase the message, but it would not go away. Even when they changed the screen, even when they rebooted the station, it stayed. And after 1 hour, the station lit up again, working like normal. But the message still glowed quietly. The Zorvani leaders heard about this and frowned. It was not an attack, but it was not nothing. Something had started, but they still did not take it seriously. One missing ship, one broken station. They had bigger problems, they thought. But then another station lost power. This time, it was on the edge of a mining belt. The machines froze in place. The oxygen system blinked off for 5 minutes, just long enough to scare the workers. When they came outside to fix it, they found the same glowing words written on the side of their largest storage tank. "We do not forget." One by one, little things began to happen across the Zorvani Empire. Ships arrived late. Orders went missing. Doors wouldn't open. Codes didn't work. It was always just enough to cause trouble, but never enough to be called war. Not yet. In secret, human teams were working together. Some were experts in machines. Some were experts in networks. Others simply knew how to disappear. They didn't wear uniforms. They didn't carry flags, but they moved with purpose. One small team boarded a Zorvani satellite late at night. They didn't hurt anyone. They didn't break anything. But when they left, the satellite played a slow song across the galaxy, a human lullaby. A song that Ellie Tran, the young student, used to sing to her baby brother. It played for 7 minutes, long enough for people to ask, why this song? Another team sent a fake message across the Zorvani communication line. It was short, just 2 words. "Remember Zara." The Zorvani tried to block the message, but it had already spread. Millions saw it. No one knew who sent it, but the people began to whisper. They began to question. Who was Zara? Why did her name matter? Even on Zorvani home planets, strange things began to happen. Public screens flashed pictures, just for a second, of the 10 humans who were killed. It was never long enough to prove, but it was long enough to be seen, long enough for children to ask, who are they? The Empire said it was a trick, a lie, but they could not stop the pictures from coming back. Each small act was like a drop of water falling on stone. One drop does nothing, but many drops, they wear the stone down. In deep space, one Zorvani warship lost control for 12 seconds. No one was hurt, but all the lights went off. The ship turned slowly in the dark. When power came back, the crew found their main screen frozen. There was a face on the screen, a woman's face. She had short hair and kind eyes. Under the face was a name, Annika Bose. The captain shouted to remove it, but the techs couldn't. The picture stayed for 5 more minutes before vanishing. The captain was shaken. He remembered Annika's name from the video. She was one of the 10. Now he was afraid. The Zorvani leaders met in quiet rooms. They spoke in low voices. They were not ready to panic. But they were not calm either. The attacks were small, yes, but they were growing. They were smart. They were human. A few Zorvani advisors warned, "This is just the beginning. They are not trying to destroy us. They are showing us what they can do." But the Zorvani rulers laughed. "They are weak," said one. "They cannot fight us in the open. They hide like rats." But one general did not laugh. Her name was Kyra Vaux. She was older than most, with sharp eyes and a quiet voice. She watched the reports and said nothing for a long time. Then she whispered, "They are not hiding." The Zorvani Empire was strong, proud, and very sure of itself. For many years they ruled their part of the galaxy with no fear. Other planets followed their rules. Other leaders stayed quiet when the Zorvani spoke. No one dared to stand against them. They believed they were too powerful to fall. But now something was happening, something strange. At first, the leaders of the Empire didn't think much of the missing ships or quiet power failures. They said it was just space pirates. Maybe accidents. Space was full of dangers, but one leader did not agree. Her name was Commander Cyril Varn. Cyril was not like the other Zorvani generals. She didn't speak loudly. She didn't brag about victories. She watched, she listened, and she remembered. She sat in her private office, surrounded by glowing screens. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines. A small robot served her tea, but she didn't touch it. Her eyes were focused on the reports in front of her. There were too many problems in too many places. A fuel depot had lost its power for 6 minutes. A cargo ship had vanished. A farming satellite had started sending the wrong data. A transport station near the border had been painted with a message. "Remember the 10." It wasn't random. She could feel it. Cyril stood up and walked to the wall. She touched a button and a map of the Empire appeared. Red dots blinked where problems had happened. First there were only a few, then more, then many, all around the border where humans traveled. She drew a line between the events. It made a shape. "Le pattern." She stared at it for a long time. Her eyes narrowed. Her fingers tapped the edge of the table. "This isn't chance," she whispered. Cyril called her team. "Bring me every report involving human-coded signals," she said. "Even the ones others think are small." The officers came quickly. They dropped files and screens on her desk. One by one she opened them. Messages in strange code. Pictures that showed human faces. Audio that played human voices. Some were soft like lullabies. Some were simple like a name said again and again. Cyril leaned back in her chair. "They're not attacking," she said. "They're warning." A younger officer frowned. "But why not strike directly?" he asked. "Why send music and names?" Cyril looked at him. Her voice was cold and quiet. "Because they want us to listen before they make us fall." The officer said nothing more. She ordered her people to start tracking every signal, every ship, every strange movement. She sent spies to the outer worlds to look for human groups. She asked for help from other leaders, but most of them didn't take her seriously. They thought she was just being too careful. They laughed in meetings. But the problems didn't stop. In fact, they grew. On one of the Zorvani home planets, a city went dark for 10 minutes. The buildings didn't break. The machines weren't stolen. But when the power came back, people found a large screen in the center of town showing 10 faces. 10 humans. One was a smiling young woman with a stethoscope. One was a man with cooking tools. One was a teacher holding books. The screen said, "They were not soldiers. You made them your enemies." People watched. No one spoke. Some children asked, "Who are they?" Parents didn't know what to say. Later that day, all Zorvani news networks tried to take down the image, but copies had already spread. It was too late. On another moon, a military base was hacked. No weapons were taken. No data was stolen. But every door opened and closed by itself. And from every speaker, a human child's voice spoke. "Do you know their names?" It sent chill down the backs of the soldiers. Cyril Varn got the report and read it 5 times. "We need to speak to Earth," she said. But the Emperor of the Zorvani, Lord Maltrix, refused. He said, "We do not bow to humans. We do not beg. This will pass." Cyril wanted to argue, but she stayed quiet. She knew the truth, and it scared her. The humans were not angry, not loud. They were quiet, careful, cold. That made them dangerous. On another front, small human-made drones were found flying near Zorvani space lanes. They didn't carry bombs. They didn't carry weapons. But each drone had a small display that said, "You watched them die. Now we watch you live." Cyril sent out messages to commanders across the empire. "Stay alert. Change all codes. Upgrade security." Some listened, others didn't. Then came the strangest report of all. On a mining planet deep in Zorvani space, a group of workers found a metal box buried under the sand. It wasn't Zorvani tech. It looked simple. Inside was a small glass screen. When they turned it on, a video played. It showed a young girl playing music on a flute. A voice said, "This is Zara. She loved music. You took her from us." The workers turned pale. Some dropped their tools, some cried. None of them had ever met a human. But now they knew one, and they couldn't forget. Cyril added it to the growing list of warnings. "They want us to see their faces," she said to her advisors. "They want us to know them, so we can never pretend they didn't matter." Across the Zorvani Empire, unease began to spread. Ships were delayed. Stations were nervous. Leaders avoided questions. People began to whisper in markets, in schools, in quiet homes. What if the humans are coming? And still, no one had seen a real human fleet. No warships, no armies. Just names. Just faces. Just memories. The enemy was not outside their doors. It was inside their minds. Commander Cyril Varn stood once more in her office. She looked at the blinking map. So many red lights now. She pressed a button and recorded a private message. "To Earth," she said, "I know what was done. I know we crossed a line. I do not ask for peace. I ask for time." She saved the message. She would send it soon. But she feared it might already be too late. Because the humans had already begun. And they were not stopping. They were not attacking with fire. They were attacking with truth. And truth is the hardest weapon to fight. Far from the Zorvani Empire, on a small blue planet called Earth, people were no longer sad. They were no longer just crying, watching the videos, or whispering the names of the 10. Now they were planning. And this time it wasn't just small teams working alone. It wasn't just a quiet warning. Earth was waking up, and it was preparing to answer. But the plan would not be loud. It would not be shown on news screens. There would be no big speech, no cheering crowds, only silence, and the sound of doors closing behind locked rooms. In the city of Geneva, deep underground, a room filled with long glass tables and wide screens glowed with blue light. Around the tables sat leaders from every part of Earth's reach: military generals, space engineers, code experts, peace officers, colony founders, and more. They were not smiling. They were not shaking hands. They were here because 10 people had been taken. And now Earth had decided something important. The old rules were no longer enough. No one wore medals. No one wore suits. Some came in flight jackets. Some wore lab coats. One woman still had dirt on her boots from working on a Mars greenhouse. It didn't matter. They were not here to look important. They were here to act. At the center of the room was a black screen. It showed 10 faces, side by side, the 10 humans who had been killed. Underneath, one word blinked slowly: REMEMBRED. The first person to speak was Admiral Yara Quinn. She had silver hair, a deep voice, and eyes that saw everything. She had fought in the ice war of Europa and led peace talks after the storm riots on Ganymede. She stood up and said, "They were civilians. They were not threats. And now the galaxy needs to know we do not forget." Next to her was General Marco Bell, once a miner on the asteroid belt, now head of Earth's border defense. He leaned forward and said, "We have the tools. We have the people, but this must be clean, no chaos. We strike the system, not the people. We don't break, we bend." Dr. Sahana Idris, who once built the shields for Earth's outer colonies, nodded. "This is not about revenge. This is about balance, about warning them the right way. A war would break everything. A message will build something stronger." In one corner sat a man named Leo Chen. He had been a close friend of Ellie Tran, one of the 10. He was a quiet coder who had spent the last few weeks tracing every Zorvani data trail he could find. He now had maps, real ones. He passed them forward without saying a word. The others studied the maps. They showed supply lines, power stations, fleet routes, and secret Zorvani bunkers. They also showed weak points, places where a quiet strike could do more than a loud blast ever could. All across Earth, in quiet labs and hidden bases, people were building new tools. Tiny drones with silent wings. Virus codes that slid between systems like whispers. Ships that could disappear from screens and reappear where no one expected. These were not tools of destruction. They were tools of control. Because Earth didn't want to destroy the Zorvani Empire. It wanted to hold it in its hand and squeeze, just enough. Enough to make them listen. Enough to make them feel what they had made Earth feel. In a quiet mountain base near Peru, a special group met in total silence. They called themselves the Witnesses. Each person in the room had known one of the 10. Some were family, others were friends. A few had never met the victims, but had been saved by them long ago. These witnesses were not commanders or leaders. They were the heart of the mission. They gave the plan its meaning. One witness, an old man with a limp, stood up. His name was Paolo. He had worked with Tom Booker, the janitor who died. He said, "Tom once gave me his only coat during a blizzard. He didn't think twice. The Zorvani think we are weak because we help others. They don't understand. Our kindness is our strength." The others nodded. These were not angry people. They were sad people who had learned how to turn grief into purpose. In another place far above Earth, on a secret orbital station, engineers finished building something new. It looked like a satellite, but it was. Inside it were thousands of names, not just the 10 who had died, but every person ever lost in a forgotten war, a quiet attack, or a hidden raid. The names would shine across the stars, a long light that would drift above every Zorvani planet. It would not attack. It would not speak. It would simply shine. Because sometimes light is stronger than noise. Meanwhile, Earth's best minds were linking together. They created a network called the Thread. It was invisible. It could not be stopped. It passed through every system like a ghost. It carried voices, names, faces, messages. Every time a Zorvani system blinked or stuttered, the thread left a memory behind. Like footsteps in snow. Like fingerprints on glass. The thread was not run by just one person. It was made by many. Coders, artists, students, retired soldiers, journalists, farmers, pilots, teenagers. It was made by people who had lost someone. People who had had enough. In every corner of human space, ships were being prepared. Not warships, but ghost ships, silent, fast, and clever. They could fly into deep space and vanish. Then, when the time was right, reappear, not to fight, but to make the Zorvani pause. To make them worry. To make them think. On Neptune's moon, a small girl named Lara wrote a letter to the galaxy. Her older sister, Zara, had been one of the 10. The letter was short. It said, "My sister liked to sing. She didn't like loud noises or scary people, but she helped others. You hurt her, and I miss her. I hope you know what you did, and I hope you change." The letter was sent out through every channel. Millions read it, even some Zorvani. It was simple, but it was honest, and it stayed. At the end of the meeting in Geneva, Admiral Quinn stood once more. She looked around the room and said, "We don't want to rule, we don't want to destroy, we want to warn. And when we act together." Everyone stood. No oaths. No claps. Just a quiet nod. Earth had made its decision. The time for waiting was over. The time for warning had come. And when it came, it would not roar. It would whisper. And every Zorvani would hear it. The plan had started, and now Earth was moving. It did not begin with noise or fire. It began with silence. Quietly, humans reached out into the stars. They did not bring bombs. They did not bring armies. They brought warnings. They brought memories. On a small Zorvani fuel outpost, the lights blinked off and soft music filled the air. It was a song from Earth, the same song Zara once played on her flute. No one knew how it got there. The guards tried to stop it, but they couldn't. Then the doors locked, the fuel levels dropped. When the power came back, half the fuel was gone, and every screen showed a simple message: "We are here. We are watching." The next day, a space station above planet Varnock found its food crates empty. Nothing was broken, nothing was taken by force. But inside each crate was a folded note. On every note were 10 names. Each name had a small picture next to it: a book, a mop, a chef's hat, a stethoscope. The Zorvani soldiers stared at the notes. No one spoke. One whispered, "They didn't just take supplies, they gave us their story." It happened again the next day, this time on a weapons platform. All the missiles were turned off. The guards were locked out. When they got back inside, they found a message painted on the wall: "Do not make us monsters. We remember the 10." All across the Empire, the attacks continued, but they were not attacks like before. A mining station shut down, only to reopen with glowing flowers lining the tunnels. A trade port lost power, and every ship started playing the same soft Earth song. A Zorvani school found its students, tablets filled with photos of Earth teachers, smiling and kind. No one had seen a single human ship. No one had been harmed. But the Zorvani people began to feel nervous. Something was inside their systems. Something smart, something careful. Even their banks were touched. Money shifted. Numbers changed. The rich lost credits. The poor gained them. On one screen, a little drawing of Tom Booker, the janitor, appeared with a heart around his name. No one understood how Earth had done it, but everyone knew what it meant. Earth was not breaking the Empire. It was bending it slowly, silently. One warship found its systems filled with poems by Liana Brooks, one of the 10. Her poems were about light and kindness. The captain read them, and instead of following his patrol orders, he turned the ship around. No one argued. In a meeting of Zorvani traders, every screen froze and showed the same message: "You have taught fear, we teach memory." Then the faces of the 10 humans appeared. People in the room fell silent. Some cried, some stared. None forgot. Across the galaxy, Earth continued its quiet work. Outposts stopped running. Stations froze. Yet there was no war, no blood, just reminders everywhere. Earth's attacks were strong but quiet. They didn't need to destroy. They only needed to remind. In one empty ship, the Zorvani found a video of Ellie Tran helping a patient. It played on a loop. The soldiers who saw it left without touching anything. Even the Empire's children began to ask questions. Who were the 10? Why were they taken? Can we say sorry? And in many places, Zorvani leaders began to change. Some refused to fight. Some left their posts. One governor stepped down and said, "They are stronger than we knew. Let's not give them a reason to strike again." Through it all, Earth stayed quiet. No victory dances. No bright news, just more soft messages, just more memories. Their goal was never war, it was understanding. And with every quiet act, that understanding began to grow. Zorvani cities now echoed with songs from Earth. Children drew pictures of human faces. And slowly the Empire began to listen. Earth had not used force. Earth had used truth. And truth was winning. The leaders of the Zorvani Empire were getting angry. The quiet attacks from Earth were making them look weak. Their systems kept failing. Their supplies were being taken. Their people were growing afraid. But most of all, the humans were winning without even firing a shot. The Zorvani Emperor could not accept this. He wanted to show the galaxy that his empire was still strong. So they made a new plan. This time they would set a trap. They would leave an old space station wide open, as if it were broken and forgotten. It would look like an easy target. But behind it, hidden in the shadows of a nearby moon, they placed 10 powerful warships. These ships had strong weapons, new shields, and fast engines. They were waiting, ready to crush any human ship that came close. They thought Earth would fall right into their hands. The plan looked simple. The old station named Crydon 6 was left mostly empty. Only a small team of Zorvani officers stayed behind to watch and report. They waited, days passed. Then a small ship showed up on their sensors. It didn't have a name, it didn't answer any calls, it moved slowly toward the station. The Zorvani soldiers sent a message, "Do you need help?" But there was no reply. The ship kept coming. The Zorvani waited until the ship docked. Then they prepared to spring their trap. But when they opened the ship, they found something strange. No humans were inside. The ship was completely empty. It had no crew, no weapons, and no tools. Just one black box sitting in the middle of the ship. The box blinked with soft blue light. One Zorvani officer reached out and touched the box. The moment he did, every light in the station turned off. At the same time, on the hidden warships, every control screen froze. The engines stopped. The weapons shut down, doors locked. The crews were trapped. A soft human voice played from every speaker. It said, "You tried to set a trap, but we were already inside." The Zorvani leaders panicked. They shouted orders, but nothing worked. Their ships could not move. Their computers were useless. They had been hacked. On every screen, glowing words appeared. "You cannot catch what you do not understand." Then another message, "We are not here to destroy." Then finally, "You tried to use silence, but silence belongs to us." After a few minutes, the power came back. The systems turned on again. The ships could move, but the weapons no longer worked. Their own machines had been changed. If they tried to fight again, the system would freeze once more. The humans had left a secret code deep inside their networks. It was not made to hurt. It was made to stop any more violence. The trap had failed. The Zorvani Empire had tried to catch the humans, but the humans had already been one step ahead. They had turned the trap around. The humans had not come to fight. They came to teach a lesson. The Empire had planned for war, but Earth had planned for peace with strength. Now the mighty warships floated in space, powerless. Their leaders had no choice but to sit and think. They finally saw what Earth had been trying to say all along. Back on Earth, the people who had built the mission watched in silence. They didn't cheer, they didn't clap, they just watched. They knew this was never about revenge. It was about memory, it was about justice. Admiral Yara Quinn folded her arms and said they had their chance. Leo Chen, the coder who helped stop the ships, looked at the map and said they trapped themselves. Dr. Sahana Idris turned off the screen and added, "We never needed a war. We only needed them to listen." On one Zorvani colony, a teacher showed her class the faces of the 10 humans who were taken. She told their stories. She said their names. A small child raised his hand and asked, "Why didn't we listen sooner?" The teacher looked at the class and said quietly, "Maybe now we finally will." In another part of the Empire, Commander Cyril Varn sat alone in her office. She had warned the Empire weeks ago, but no one listened. Now she stared at the stars. "They were never just stories," she said. "They were real, and we made them into legends." She opened her computer and looked at a message she had written but never sent. It said, "To Earth, I know what we did. I can't undo it, but I want to stop it from happening again. Please talk to us." She pressed the send button. The galaxy was no longer filled with pride or fear. It was filled with silence, not the silence of anger, not the silence of power, but the silence of change. Earth had spoken, and now the whole galaxy was listening.